You got the pictures that are in the system. The link comparison, that was the new one. This one, the kids are big at these stores. That's the back. I don't think you've got to worry about that. So, I feel like and doing no, it's usually well, like, I mean, Casey can just go with whatever college course. Like, I want to go find whatever and just keep getting that. It gives, I think it's a good way.
Welcome, everyone. I'd like to call to order the regular meeting of the Huron City School Board of Education. If you could call the roll, please.
Dr. LaFay?
Here.
Mr. Rager?
Here.
Mrs. Hartley?
Here.
Mrs. Mast?
Here. If everyone would please stand with us for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We need an approval of the agenda for our regular meeting this evening. So moved.
Second.
Mrs. Hartley?
Yes.
Mr. Rager?
Yes.
Dr. LaFay?
Yes.
Mrs. Mast?
Yes, thank you. We are now to item number 3, our audience community comments.
Don't have any forms yet.
Was there anyone in our audience this evening that wanted to bring anything before the board this evening? Okay. We will move along to administrative reports, number 4.
All right, so for the first one, we have our building presentation. I'm going to kick it over to Mr. Dowdy. Kick us off.
Hi there. Thank you for hosting us this evening and letting us showcase one of our new programs. This year, Mrs. Tracy Harbaugh came over to McCormick as our 6th grade social studies teacher. And in the planning and preparation for the school year, she reached out to me and asked if it would be possible to start a new club, a civics club. Thinking about what my mantra has always been, which is kindness, compassion, and respect towards others, I felt that it truly fit where we were at and what we wanted to accomplish. Along with meeting all those, it also helps our students build some quality leadership skills. So here today we have our Civics Club with Mrs. Harbaugh to present what they've accomplished this year. Thank you.
Hi.
Yes. All right, so thank you for inviting our Civics Club to share what we've been up to this year. Here we go.
How long has your club been active?
Just this year. We
Just
just
this
started,
year?
yep, we just kicked it off in the fall.
And then did the students have to apply to be part of Civics Club, or you just took?
I took whoever was interested, but I had a little questionnaire
Mhm.
and kind of showed them if it would support their interests.
Very nice. And are you doing community service? Are they getting community service hours for some of the things they're doing,
I
or?
haven't logged any, but they definitely have earned some. Happiness.
Oh, great job. Also, just wanted to extend, if you're here with the civics group and you wanted to see your child, please don't feel like you need to stay for the rest of the meeting. We would love to have you stay for the rest of the meeting, but you're not obligated to.
For all the students who are just so eager to become a school board member someday as they're running out the door.
Ready to move on?
Yep. Okay, so are you talking about?
Nope, you can.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Stakeholder facility committee presentation. So we have some of the representatives here. I'll kick it over to Chris and Beth if they want to add more as they're coming up to the podium.
I just say I'd like to thank all the public community members that joined us and supported. We had between 20 and 30 at almost all the meetings, and thank Dan and Amber for presenting the outcome and where we're at so far this evening. I'll leave the rest of them for now.
So again, Dan Humphrey. I'm joined here with Amber Solomon, and we see several committee members as well. So I want to thank you very much for this opportunity to share some of our findings that we have come to over the past several months. Timeline-wise, we began to meet in September, and we met obviously 4 or 5 times at that point, and it's been on Sundays, and I want to kind of extend the thank you to the administrative team and the board members for giving up Sundays to involve the community. You didn't have to involve the community, but it was really nice to have a voice and to share different ideas and thoughts about different buildings and I guess the stakeholder input. We do have a couple of the meetings on the books to kind of continue on with this effort. You'll see that it was broken up into subcommittees of funding, current facilities, future spaces, marketing, parent and voter registration, and then McCormick. It was about 5 members per group, and that began again. And probably in October, we broke off into groups, met again to share out in January what we've been working on over those several months, and then really started to share what is the most realistic plan there in March. I'm a father of 2 Huron Tigers, one that has graduated last year and one that's a current sophomore. I feel passionate where this plan may not affect my kids, but definitely will affect Amber's and hopefully maybe grandkids one day. But this is the heart of our community. Huron School sits kind of in the middle, and it's the heartbeat. So it's great that we had passionate members that represented all walks of life at all ages, and these are just some of the things that we have found in this process. I'm going to turn it over to Amber to share some of the things that we have found as we took a facilities tour.
Hi, I'm Amber. I have 4 boys spanning from 2nd grade to 8th grade. So to Dan's point, this is something that we're definitely interested, especially for the future of not only my kids, but future Tigers as well. As a member of the current facilities committee, what we did is take a tour of Woodlands. It was an extensive tour with maintenance to kind of show us, you know, the good, the bad, the ugly, everything. And what we found is the bones of the building are great. It does have the newest addition compared to other buildings, but the older part of Woodlands is in need of more extensive repair than I think was originally thought. Windows, LED lighting, a lot of the casings are old, and I just feel like when you step into that classroom and it looks dreary and it doesn't look like an exciting place to learn, I think that we owe it to our students to be able to make some improvements, but still being fiscally responsible. We feel that there's some security measures that can be done, like new windows, and the current kindergarten classrooms, 2 of which do not even have windows in the classroom. The classrooms open to the hallway, but only 2 of the kindergarten classrooms have windows, and they are just in need of storage throughout the entire building. They're just at pretty much max capacity. So I just feel like there are a lot of improvements that can be made looking ahead to what do we want the future of Huron to look like, not just now, but 20, 30 years from now.
There is no final plan. I think the final plan is very much up to the board and some other architects at this point. But where we left it is close with all the input and all the debate within the stakeholder facility group. It was nice to see this plan evolve with input. What started off as a 1 campus model at $90 million as one of the options didn't seem to be the most realistic option. You're going to be operating off of 2 campuses anyways. And then we started paring down what is realistic, what is something that is attractive to voters, how much that would cost, what is worth the sacrifice to our students and staff. And one of the things that we left with was, given the bones of Woodlands and this current high school, is it's primed for renovation. It's amazing what could be done with the renovation, given, again, the bones of each building being as strong as that they are. Talking about making this a 6th through 12th grade campus here, with some additional classroom spaces added on to be able to bring over the middle school. some additional administrative spaces, so to add some offices. And then in order to host some junior high games and practices, another athletic complex of some sort. Looking at Woodlands, some renovation to add windows and some additional storage, and I guess make it more up to date with security measures, as well as an auditorium, whether that be on this campus or Woodlands. I think that is up for the board and the architects to come up with those final plans. But knowing that Miss Jackson does an amazing job right now, we can only imagine what she would do in a brand new auditorium. Obviously, Woodlands has the space, and again, it's got great parking. So one of the things that we left it with, it came to the recommendations of the subcommittee, is looking to renovate Woodlands preschool through 5th grade, looking to renovate the high school to include the middle school, 6 through 12, a 2-campus model. There will be additional needs when it comes to new athletics, new auditorium, and administrative spaces. Looking at that, and Mr. Rager could speak to this far better than I can, is given the renovation and the new additions, the average homeowner in Huron, this would be an additional $35 a month, reaching our debt capacity. We felt that, given what that would do for our school system over the next so many years, would be well worth the investment, because it's investment in the academics, the athletics, and the arts. The key is, how do we make it all ages? What can we do for the community so they have a stake in buying into this plan, as 75% of the voters do not have children here? What can we do to entice them to the usage or community use to get them to vote for this? I think where we stood as a committee is an unapologetic support of our kids. I think our kids are worth it, their future is worth it, and I think obviously the sacrifice of $35 or more a month is something that sounds doable for others that will be a sacrifice, but something for the long-term future. We're not going to apologize because we think our kids are worth it. Our staff is worth it. They're doing a great job. That Civics is just a great little example of all the little entities that we may or may not even know about within the walls of our school system. So with that, do you have any questions?
I don't have any questions, but I just want to thank you so much for giving of your time and being part of this facilities committee. I think this is a dream for all of us to have. You have what, 30 people that are involved in this. I think that's phenomenal. I just want to personally thank you for jumping in and doing this.
It's a credit to the board and Dr. Tapman. You don't have to do this. It's been nice to be a participant in this. It's a two-way street, and again, there's several boards or school systems that just go and do, and it's nice to be a part of it. So it begins at the top down. Thank you.
Thank you both very much, and thanks Chris and Beth both for all of your time above and beyond to work with the committee and community members. Thank you.
Sure. And just to clarify that is looking at trying to do the project with the debt capacity of around the 68 million. So that's we looked at the options. That honestly, this last number that came back from the architect is still around that 90 million number, but we have some. That was like just the first go at it, and we think there's some things we'll have to work through all that going forward. We don't have the final plan, but as a committee, we talked through the last meeting, and it became apparent to everyone, I think, that that's probably the limit we want to ask for if we go to the voters, and try to make something work within that and our additional funds that we have available to us. So that does give us a little bit of extra wiggle room from that 68 million, but that's kind of what the thought of the committee is, what we would pursue.
Well, yeah, and thank you both for agreeing to be on this committee and spearheading it. It's really exciting. All right.
All right, very good. So item C is the student board liaison. So Grant, you're up.
Hello, everyone. I hope everyone had a good and relaxing spring break. But we are already back at it, and it's the fourth quarter already, which is insane. Spring sports are all up and running now. Tennis, track, softball, baseball, all sports are now starting. I know, at least for track. We have a meet next week. I know softball played today. Not sure about baseball. I know tennis has a match this week as well. But before spring break, the high school had a event in the gym called Volley Bros. It was super fun to watch. I would have to say the staff beat all the grades pretty well, but it was fun to see, and I think the students really enjoyed it. High school musical, the musical is still going, so I'm not sure when that is.
The first weekend, the 4th, 5th, and 6th is when the production. Yep.
So that's up and coming, and then state tests are also coming up, which is big and exciting for those students taking them. That's all I got.
I'm gonna let everyone know where they can get tickets.
I have not heard anything on that yet.
Yeah, so one second. Whitney Fantozzi is the ticket agent, so if you email her, she can help connect you to get you the tickets. She'll either have them here at the high school for pickup or we'll call the night of the event. And they do have a credit card purchase option now, so they work in partnership with Athletic Boosters with their credit card machines. So that was a good partnership between the two, because they said in the past that was one kind of request of the customers, of the patrons, that do you have a credit card option? So they work with Boosters for that.
Cell phone, so it's nice of her to stick around.
Right. So we are 2/3 of the way through the fiscal year. It's flying by. Revenues for all funds were at 73.4%, and general fund we're at 77.2%. We did receive our tax advance in February, so that was the boost there. Expenditures were under on all funds, we're at 61%, and on general fund we're at 58.3%. We will have that three payrolls in May, so that'll boost that up a little bit, get those numbers closer. Yeah, on the investment sheet, I am in the process of closing the Fifth Third accounts, and we're just going to take that over and put it into Star Ohio. The rates are similar. I was asking Cindy, I was like, why do we have 3 different ones when Star seems to be the best? She didn't have an answer, so I said, well, we're going to close it. So we're going to move that over to Star Ohio. Donations, $2,500 from the Ohio Dogs of the Huron Wrestling Program. Item C under my report, we had, just on Friday, we got 2 new safety grants. One for $40,000 and one for $5,195. So those are on there to approve those new funds. And item D is the Certificate of Estimated Resources from the County Auditor. That will have the anticipated revenues from all of it and the millage as well. So once we get that approved, I'll be able to send that off to the auditor that approved it, and then I can start budgeting for FY26. The only other thing is next month is April. 5-year forecast is going to ramp up, so I'll be doing that. And then unless there's anything concrete in legislative changes, which I don't think there will be, I'll probably have a couple different scenarios to look at just so we can look and see where we're headed. So. Yep. Yeah, that was actually Dr. Tatman. Can't take credit for that one.
No, and those safety grants have a condition that it has to help support communication between school and law enforcement or safety services. So we're looking at how to apply it appropriately that meets the grant conditions, and we have a couple ideas we're kicking around. So we're going to start working on pricing and see how far that grant can take us. So, yeah. All right. So I'll just start with the superintendent recommendations. New Story School Service, so that's special education services for students based on their IEP. This is the annual North Point ESC service agreement, so this is for school year 26, the 25-26 school year. They provide us various services, and they help us really think about other activities happening in our community how do different entities consolidate or collaborate to have cost-effective operations. And for me, North Point ESC Services is one of those examples. And then Lorain County ESC, they also provide us some services, not to the same extent as North Point, but different services. School transportation, so this is one we've talked about several times, and so this is the official recommendation. Moving into next school year, we will start with we'll continue with all resident students in kindergarten through 5th grade, 6th through 8th, so all of McCormick students who live greater than 1 mile from McCormick are eligible for transportation. And then at the high school, all resident students greater than 1 mile from the high school with parent request. So we're not going to automatically assume they want to ride, but I know Mr. Carter is working on an electronic request process. We'll roll that out in the summer, and then we'll start plotting those trips. So that's excellent. And then we'll continue with shuttle service between the high school and Ehobie. So before and after school that happens. Engineer Resources is our energy billing provider or energy provider. So we're locking in those 2-year rates now, prior to everyone's speculating that the rates are going to jump. So we're locking those in now. Ohio School Councils helped negotiate that rate and gave guidance on that as far as this is a competitive rate. It's probably not going to be around for a while, so let's lock that in. So that's there. The other item F is replacement of a chiller at Woodlands. So Woodlands Elementary, the air conditioning is driven by a chiller. There's huge, it's like a small RV that's parked outside. It's the same size as an RV, it's not an RV. So that was on the fritz last summer. There's no reason to think it's going to be any better next summer. So we have a quote to purchase that. The lead time on that is 9 to 10 months. So getting it ordered now, we hope to have it start to be installed in the fall. September still tends to be hot nowadays, so hopefully we got it up and running for that. The next one, item G, is purchase of a new school bus. So we're getting back on that schedule. I know Mike's talked about it before as far as a new bus really every year for a few years here, and then we'll go to every other year, and then maybe at some point we get to every 3rd year. But we really look at the age of the fleet, the average age, and the average mileage, and it's time to purchase that next bus. The last bus we bought was 2 years ago, and that was the special ed with the lift system in it. This bus is a 72 passenger conventional, so it'll be on the routes daily, serving our students. 25-26 school calendar. After last month's discussions about commencement, it was noticed that the 25-26 school year did not note commencement date. So this is amending that, and looking at the commencement date, we're going to move back to the Sunday afternoon commencement. Every year we'll look at that. As long as Sunday isn't on the holiday weekend, it'll be on Sunday. The years that we have commencement on the holiday weekend, we'll work through what day makes the most sense. And I agree with the public last time, like Sunday is probably the least amount of conflicts. So we'll keep that, or we'll bring back that practice of Sundays. Item I, we have, this is kind of cool, combo band and choir traveling out of state to perform at Walt Disney World. So that'd be February of 2026. It's cool because it's both groups going, right? So some kids do both, so they'll be able to participate in both. And then if they only do one, they can cheer for their classmates while they're doing the other. So I think that's excellent for Jordan and Adeline to be promoting that for their students. Item J, it's loading, sorry.
Mine throws too.
Okay, good. So item J, I know we had Jess Taylor on the agenda to be approved. She's recommended for employment as our first assistant principal at Woodlands, and so I see her here tonight. And I'm trying to think if there's anything else on the...
Toby Miller.
Oh, and then a salary correction for Toby Miller. Through review process, we found an error, and so we're getting that fixed today. For classified, I believe there's just 2 deployment of 2 substitutes. And so they're, as needed, at will employees. But that's it for the agenda items. Not on the agenda tonight is, with the musical coming up here in 2 weeks, last year the board purchased an advertisement sponsorship in that, and it continues to be $100. And so I just, in front of you, in front of the board members, is the ad we used last year. Do we want to do the ad again? And is this the design that, like, do we want to make any changes to the design? All right.
I think it's good. And then each board member will just contribute
$20.
20.
Yeah.
I mean, do you want us to give it to you, or how do you want us to do that?
It's mine.
Give it to Mike, the treasurer. Okay. Okay, Mike.
Uh, And then the next item I'd like to talk about is we've had a few meetings where we've talked about high school GPA. As a group, we've studied it. We've got input from school counselors, from parents, from administrators, and really, I continue to wrestle with it because here in Huron, it almost seems like we're the anomaly where we are on a 4-point scale and we do not weight or add anything. We are straight 4.0. So if you have a student who has a 4.0, that means they got all A's or A pluses throughout their entire high school career, which is a major feat, especially when we have students taking advanced courses of AP and CCP. And when we look at our regional comparisons, our DEW comparable districts, and really across the state of Ohio, there are few, if any, other schools that stick to that straight 4-point GPA. On the flip side, I agree with a lot of what counselors and school administrators said as far as when you bring in weights, GPA weights, or ads, it creates a little bit of a game, okay, a pretty big game, where some kids will play that game, which limits them from taking a risk, or it limits them from taking an elective, an enrichment. It impacts the arts. And so, there's hesitation to bring in sort of a weight system. And then ultimately, when you get down to it, our students compete, and they compete at the next level, 4-year institutions. And they go to, we have some that go to very competitive 4-year institutions, and they're competing with everyone across the state and across the nation, really to some degree across the world. So we need to make sure that when admissions officers are looking at our students' information, they're understanding the full scope of the story, and they're getting an accurate picture of how most of our students do amazing work, and it needs to be recognized. So what I have in front of you, in front of the board members here, is a potential middle ground in that we continue to maintain the traditional 4-point scale, and we, beginning with the class of 2026, so this year's class graduating, their applications to college or admissions have already been done. If we make change to their GPA, it's really not going to make an impact. So we'd be starting this with the next school year. But what we'd be looking at is, number one, high school credits earned prior to enrollment in 9th grade are accepted as credit without a letter grade. Obviously, if they failed the course, they wouldn't get the credit. But that right there alone allows kids to take that risk. So I'm an 8th grader. I'm pretty good at math, but am I mature enough to handle a high school math class as an 8th grader? I'm pretty good at ELA, and my parents are pushing me to take a CCP ELA, which you can do in 7th and 8th grade. But maybe that student then has reality, and it's like, hey, you are pretty good, you're just not there yet. And so they come out of that course with something less than an A. Right now, that lower grade continues to impact their GPA for the next 4 years. So this would say, hey, go ahead in 7th or 8th grade, take that advanced course, take that challenge, see how you do, and as long as you get a D or better, you're going to get the credit, but it's not going to affect your overall GPA. The next bullet. So are there any questions about that one? All right. So the next would be not weighted GPA, but add-on points. And this is the system that we used to have prior to eliminating it, were these add-on points. And so add-on points will be awarded for AP or college credit plus courses within the following departments: English, Math, Science, Social Studies. So again, Why AP, why CCP? Those are courses where the curriculum is set by an outside entity. And so theoretically, AP in Huron is the same rigor as AP in any other Ohio institution. Just like college credit plus taken in Huron is the same rigor as in any other institution. You start talking about honors classes, that curriculum is set by our staff internally, and there could be differences between our honors programs and another district's honors programs. I would argue ours would be more rigorous. But really staying with those two of AP and CCP, and in those core subject areas of English, math, science, social studies, the add-on point would be just for taking the course, well, that you passed, you get 0.0625 added onto your GPA. So if your average GPA is a 3.0, it's now a 3.0625. The max add-on points cannot exceed 0.50, and students can continue to take the advanced coursework without the additional points added on. So again, if you do the math, 0.0625, how many times do how many courses is that before you get to 0.5? That's 8 courses. So in theory, if you take 2 English, 2 math, 2 science, 2 social studies of AP or CCP, you will get that additional 0.5. So again, that 3.0 student is now 3.5. The 3.75 student is now 4.25. These add-on points are added to the student's average GPA, and the summation is reported as a cumulative GPA. And then finally, Grant. I was kind of laughing with Grant because this wouldn't happen, but add-on points are not included for extracurricular activity GPA requirements. So you have to have at least 5 passing grades and a GPA, I think, at 1.3, which I don't see most of our students don't have that impact at all. But if they're taking these advanced coursework, they really don't. And so then just adding or continuing on, well, I guess first, are there any questions about the add-on factors?
So if you are a 4.0 student, but you have 8 add-on classes, the highest you could graduate with is a 4.5.
Correct. Yep. Yeah. So it's not going to be a 5.0, a 6.0, which some districts, the kids get that. And that just seems over, like, to me, that's over.
For extracurricular stuff, it's right. It becomes so arbitrary. So I mean, like at least start sticking with like core curriculum, and it's one with some standardized outside entities that curriculum that would be across districts or even across the nation. I did have a question. I remember there being references to like something statutory with regards to credit CCP. Is it just that if we do weighted or add-on for any others that also has to receive it, or it didn't like spell out specifically what we had to do for CCP?
No, that's correct. So
Okay.
if we do add-on or weights for like an AP offerings, then we also have to do it for CCP. So yes.
So I guess my other question is, in the past, I think the reason we went to the model we're at now, the cum laude model, is because of the gaming the system, as you were talking about, of students taking CCP classes that really weren't that vigorous. Do we have the ability to monitor that more closely, or I don't know. I don't know that there's a way to get around that, but
So I would say right now with the system we have, students could still say, I'm going to take BG Fireland's yoga class, and that counts as a CCP PE credit. And so they get the credit, they get the college credit, and that's allowable. Same with art. Instead of taking an art here in our high school, I'm going to go take a CCP art, and I'm going to get that additional college credit. That exists now, and I think our staff offer high, we offer high engaging activities and classes that it keeps kids here in the building. With this proposal, those programs still wouldn't get the add-on points because they're not part of the English, Math, Science, Social Studies department. So I don't think it would exasperate or extend those kids who are taking those opportunities.
you have some parameters.
There's parameters. There's some protections.
So when those students that graduate with 4.0 and above, are we still recognizing them in the cum laude system, or are we going back to top 10%, or what are we doing?
No, so we're going to stick with the Latin honors recognition system. So again, that cum laude would be if they're 3.5 and above, magna cum laude if they're 3.75 and above, and then summa laude 3.9 and above. So we're probably going to, if I had to guess, we're going to have more kids in that summa laude. But they'll all continue to be recognized at that level. So they're playing a game against themselves, not against their peers. So yeah.
Great.
So again, this isn't a recommendation for tonight. This would be continued study. I do want to continue to talk with the counselors so that they understand what this all means and implications, and make sure I don't have a blind spot that I'm not seeing. If this were to become a recommendation, it would probably be within the high school handbook that is anticipated to be recommended in April. So that's what we'll see. And if it's there, I'll point it out. So there's no secret.
A question on,
Yeah.
when you said we had the add-on point system before, was that with the same add-on amount and cap and stuff, or is that a new change to
It
the,
did not have the cap, no.
Okay.
And I don't know about the
and the amount might have been higher or something?
so I can look.
I was just curious how it compared.
I genuinely appreciate you revisiting this because, we kind of left it at like call the admissions office and tell them, to take a look at it. And I got to tell you, I'm out there doing it and my kids out there doing it. And that didn't work. So
Yeah, and I would
it
say
really does make them more competitive.
it should help. Yeah, and I would say I've written a few letters of recommendations this last month, and as I'm writing and I include the student's GPA, I'm like, I know that's a really high and strong GPA. The admissions reader of that might not understand that it's on a true 4-point scale. They might be giving others that say the kid has a 4.25, a 4.4, and I'm like, that's just that's a disadvantage for our kids. So, yeah, I think trying to find a middle ground that doesn't, just create happenstance on everyone's getting GPA inflators, but something that's meaningful would be good. So, the last item that's not on the agenda is just today in the mail. I received this sort of update from the Blue Ribbon Efficiency Committee. So as a reminder, the Blue Ribbon Committee was formed was created at the direction of the county commissioners, and they're really charged with reviewing the way that municipalities, townships, cities, schools, and others operate, and consider ways that there could be cost-saving measures as well as increased service offerings. And so I think in the paper they've done a lot about talking about the shared service of 911, safety services. But this was given a good kind of update. And then on the back of that, I just want to point out that they have a few more meetings. There's one tomorrow. But I want to point out that on Tuesday the 15th, yeah, they're all during the day. On Tuesday the 15th, the topic of discussion is education. The meeting starts at 10 a.m. and it's going to be held at the McCormick Auditorium. So working with Mr. Dowdy, he's working with his teachers. They're all going to be doing some sort of field trip activity from about 9:30 until noon. So we're not having the public in, violating school safety, but we're able to host that. I've heard some of their other offerings that were at public libraries and things like that. The venue just wasn't big enough. So I talking with the Blue Ribbon leaders, I said, hey, we got a 500 seat capacity. We'd love to have you guys there. So that's Tuesday, April 15th, 10 a.m. The topic is education. But
And I want to give you a shout out because I don't think there was a lot of superintendents that got and that answered the call to the invitation, and it was brought up in a couple circles that you were being represented willingly. And
yeah, so talking with one of the chairpersons, he said, I need 3 things from you. I said, okay, what? He goes, I'd like to be at McCormick. I said, okay, we'll figure that out. We'll get it done. He said, I'd like for you to bring your superintendent and treasurer friends. I said, okay, I'll work on that too, no problem. He said, and then I want you to help kick us off. I'm like, okay. So apparently I'll be kicking us off with it. But when I shared with the superintendent, some of them were a little reserved. They said, look, I don't want to get into politics. I said, well, I don't either, but I want us telling the school story. I don't want someone else creating the narrative. So I hope it gives us the opportunity, the opportunity to tell the school story. School being more than just Huron, but you know, I shared with the Blue Ribbon Committee, like there's already a lot of ways that we collaborate and we do cost saving measures. All those North Point services is a great example, and we're always open to talking more. So I look forward to the opportunity. I look forward to the conversation, and really in the spirit of it, with my philosophy, that one Huron philosophy of, you know, resources are limited. We need to be strategic with them. There's alignment. So I'm good with doing that work. So, any other questions?
Have any other questions? Okay. I need a motion for approval for items under sections 5 through 7 in the consent agenda.
Second.
Any discussion? Okay.
Congratulations. Thank you for stepping up. She's agreed. She signed a contract, so we're just approving it.
All right. Dr. LaFay, Mr. Rager, Mrs. Hartley,
Yes.
Mrs. Mass.
Yes. Congratulations.
Yeah, and I would just add that Jess has been with Huron as a teacher since 2014. Yep. And prior to that, she's an alumni, so she's a graduate. I think she has a relative that also works for us too, sitting in the back there. No, but really, the candidate pool was strong for this assistant principal posting. We had a lot of interest. I anticipated people like Jess from the classroom level that are looking to make that first admin opportunity. We also had currently serving administrators who were looking for something different, so for a change. So throughout the process, it was kind of a rigorous process. Yeah, she continued to rise to the top at each one of those levels, at each one of those steps in the process. Her knowledge of behavior management and being able to support staff and students with that, as well as data mining for student growth and performance, definitely excelled her in that candidacy. We're excited to have her up and rolling here. So, yeah. So for number 9A, discussion, first reading of policy. So these are sort of the long-awaited policy recommended changes from OSBA. Typically it would be February. They got it out early March. So here we are for a first reading. I can read through all of them, but I would just kind of point out the new policies. Promoting parent involvement. So that is that parents' rights, Senate Bill 8. That's the policy that's coming out from that. Purchasing procedures, it's really just updates. I don't know if you want more to add.
There wasn't much on updates other than, it's been a little bit since I looked at it. The number of vendors we have to get quotes from based on the threshold. So
I think really those processes we've already been doing.
Yeah, we've already been doing them. Now it's just officially in the policy.
Then the other new, I'm saying this new policy because for us it is this release time for religious instruction. We spent time talking about this, listening to the community, both sides, and at one point, you know, as a board, decided to retire that policy. Now the law brings it back as being, instead of may, it's a shall, so we have to have it. So if there's more discussion, I think looking at other districts around us and around the state, they're making sure that the policy aligns with the law, but also holds the school day as intact for learning and separation from church and state as possible within the law. So I don't know if there's more discussion about it.
I do.
Yep.
I happened across an article from Columbus City Schools. They first adopted the policy for release time for religious instruction in 2015. And so they are now updating their policy. This is their quote, out of concern for coming back with a pile of gifts from the sponsoring entity and how that could be disruptive to the classrooms and the educational experience. They did opt to include the language that says participating organizations must agree not to provide students with any materials, snacks, clothing, candies, trinkets, or goodies for their return to school. And I would like to see Huron City Schools add that to our policy. So I have it here. Yeah.
I have a question on the policy too. I note with the transportation, and there's language in here specific that, of course, the transportation to and from the place of instruction is the responsibility of the sponsoring entity, parent, or student, but that there's note in there that it includes transportation for students with disabilities. Is there any, I guess I'm trying to think through and anticipate if there is an instance of discrimination where a student with a disability is not afforded transportation. What happens? What's our role in that? Because it's specifically spelled out in our policy, makes me think there's, that it does fall under the legal obligations that we have. I don't know what happens. Is there some sort of action that we take as a school district to ensure that a student is not being discriminated against? Meaning, do we sever an agreement with a sponsoring entity who does not uphold and help us uphold that? Or do we have any sense of that? I just think it was interesting that that language is included in there.
Yeah, that's specific of it.
Yeah.
I guess I'm gonna have to research it and find out.
Okay.
Because we're not necessarily like forming partnership agreements with them.
Right.
Parents are gonna send us a, excuse my kid from this time to that time note, and so long as a person that's picking them up is on that emergency med form, then we'll release them to that kid. But yeah, if that outside group says, hey, we can't help the kid in a wheelchair, what does that come back to us? I'll have to find out. Yeah.
Thanks.
And I would say the other part with the policy at the bottom that is scratched is that talks about background checks. And so while I think background checks are good, all of our employees have background checks with BCI and FBI, and all of our volunteers are screened. I don't necessarily want to get in the business of monitoring other people's volunteers. So that's why item 1 was scratched. And I think parents need to be aware that these individuals that are providing this service, they're not affiliated with the school. We don't know their background as far as the school. I'm sure they're all wonderful people, don't get me wrong, but we don't know. So whereas when they send their kids to our school, all of our employees, whether it's bus driver, custodian, food service, teachers, administrators, we've all passed criminal background check and don't have a record. So
I know the language in there does say that the entity is not permitted. There are certain people, if they've been convicted or pled guilty to certain offenses, that they shall not be employed or they should not be serving. And again, I guess my question comes like, and what happens if they do? And that comes to our attention. Again, so like I find it interesting that that language is included in our policy as a district. It to me, it implies we're supposed to do something about it then and take some sort of action, but the policy doesn't spell out what that is.
that part of the policy is optional, permissive. We could just take it out so it doesn't create a potential liability for us.
I guess I just asked the question of, if possible. I know this comes from folks who specialize in drafting policy based on, current, new, or revisions to existing state and federal laws. So I guess maybe my question before we not do it is always safer the better. But before we not do it, I just want to understand the expectations of us.
Yeah, let me work on it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
I was curious on the kind of like the logistics of it. Like, I don't know if this is something that's more like in the handbook or would be in this policy, but say they return late or something for whatever reason. But how do you assure like the students that are their class continues on instead of waiting for 5 or 10 kids? Or like, is there anything that would be in here? Is that just like a handbook type thing, or is it a tardy policy? I don't know.
So, I
It's
mean,
kind of
the-
like there's a lot of interpretation on that side of it too. Like,
And like the bigger theme of the question is like, so if an outside entity violates the policy, what's the recourse? I mean, it's kind of, all three of the questions kind of tie back to that theme, right? So let me find out.
Or like kind of like a how many strikes and you're out type of question.
Yeah, because then it comes, do we have latitude to say whether like a certain entity, right, is okay or not okay, which is not in this policy, but it's kind of a strange thing that the legislators would include language like this and put, some power on our governance of this policy without really anything to like back it up. I mean, so exactly.
Are you talking about a group coming in, like that kind of entity, or?
I think right. I was surprised when I saw the legislation come through and included that, we could demand background checks. And it was kind of like, well, but we don't contract with the group. So like, why are we getting into that of like who their employees are, maintaining lists? Like that just seemed like a lot. So I was kind of surprised.
Right, we're not supposed to have any administration
That's correct.
doing
No.
anything with this policy. Yeah,
We're just releasing the kids. But if you have one that, right, if there's issues with continual disruption to class, kids get lost, like things happen. I mean, it's unclear from the law, from, recommended policies, what our obligation is and what we could do about it.
Some more stuff. And then the other policies are revised policies, so existing policies that are revised. And these changes are based on legislative changes and then recommended from OSBA. So I don't want to say nothing insignificant because they're all obviously policy changes, but I don't know if you want me to read them.
I don't think I don't think we need to, but
It's in
does
public
anyone?
comment. No, I mean, it's in the public
Yeah.
content. People
Yeah.
can see what it is.
Any questions about policy? And 9B is funding allocation, so programming and services. So it was December that Mike and I brought to the board the white paper that we co-authored, and then we vetted it with the finance committee, and then we brought it to the board as far as, this can help start telling the story of what we're doing with the additional revenues from the 20 mil floor factor that has increased some property value taxes for individuals and increased revenue for us. So really, there are some items from that white paper that I think additional conversations need to happen here at the board level as Mike gets ready for his May forecast. If those, depending on how those conversations go, that might make an impact on that forecast. So the first on the list there is restore high school busing, and we just did that tonight. So, so that one we can check off. But that's one that high school busing went away after some failed operating levies, and it's now been restored. And I think we're doing it in a cost-effective way, and working with parents and getting it done. The next one there is is pay to participate. So after those two operating levies failed, pay to participate was installed or implemented. And I know that's always kind of been a thorn in the side of parents and the board and the community. So Mike has some of the numbers we can share, but it's really discussing, do we start looking for the next school year, do we suspend it? Do we not have that fee collection? So
Yeah, so I went back and looked over the last 3, and I did up through December of this year. Pay to play is roughly $38,000 to $40,000 a year is what it brings in.
Are you typically fully collecting the pay to play amounts, or are there outstanding balances?
I don't believe there's any outstanding balances for pay to participate. No. I believe we're collecting all that for the athletes that participate. Mm-hmm.
This is one that pay to participate was something that existed before I got here, and when I first learned about it, I scratched my head a little bit in that The fee is $125, and once you pay it once, you don't have to pay it again. So everybody hits that cap. But there wasn't a carve out for students who are eligible for the free lunch program. So school fees, where you have to pay for textbooks or supplies for class, if you're eligible for the federal lunch program, those fees are waived. Pay to participate wasn't. And so, so if we were kind of in the middle ground, it would be like, well, let's add that waiver. But I think we're at a point where we can just suspend it for all.
That
And,
makes sense.
you know, even with the pay to participate that went to the district and helped offset that every year in the spring we have a deficit in the athletic budget that the general fund has to fund. That helped lower that. There are still fees that sports impose, and that's to pay for various social activities that go along with the sport, some equipment, and jersey, not jerseys, but like warm up outfits and those types of things. So this is really talking about pay to participate that the district's collecting, not those other things that I know working with boosters, the board liaison, and the director of activities and athletics, we're working to get our arms around that better. I still anticipate some fees are going to have to exist because those team meals and those kind of things come, they got to be paid somehow. So, so we're not doing it tonight, but it sounds like in April we'll come in with that, suspending that for next school year. Okay, number 3. We used to be a paying member of the Huron Joint Rec. We no longer are. We're still a member. And it's something that was cut during that time of 2 operating levies didn't pass. We did some good study on that. We had a meeting almost 18 months ago or 2 years ago now. Jody, you and I, and the treasurer at the time. And we came together, we kind of shared ideas, the original inception of the Huron Joint Rec and the benefits that it brings the community as far as being able to do things broader than what one individual entity could do. Some of those examples would be the concrete sidewalk that goes from the pedestrian bridge over to Woodlands. That was in part supported by the Huron Joint Rec. Some of the lights at the McCormick soccer field were put in because of the Joint Rec. Improvements at Favens Park, part of Joint Rec. Now, I don't know where we sit today on this. I don't know if the previous structure as far as fee assessment is something that I would agree to. In those meetings, we talked about, when it first went into inception, it was about $20,000, and we had about 1,600 students in our district. Now, last time it was paid, it was about $50,000, and we had about 1,100 students in our district. So when you go down to like a per student amount, it went from about $5 up to about $20. It's kind of a big swing. So I don't know, maybe it's something that continues to need study. Maybe I'm talking too much at this point. So
I think it's something that we need to study further because I don't think it's affected either entity negatively as far as I know. I think it needs to have further discussion and investigation.
or maybe it doesn't. Maybe the current model works as far as we're members, we don't pay into a general pot, but we do in-kind services, right? So when Safety Town wants to use Woodlands, there's no rental fee for that. When a community group wants to use the McCormick soccer field or the stadium, there's no fee for that. Just like when we want to use the boat basin for kindergarten graduation or the ice cream social, there's no fee for that, right?
I can see us coming together with Parks and Rec if there's a big project and they want to engage the schools because it's going to have an impact on the schools and they want us to partner with them somehow, financially. I could see there being a discussion then. But just to year after year continually put in $50,000 I don't think that's wise.
Yeah,
I think I'm looking back to right the work of the community with the committee, and I'm seeing and hearing like thinking about how to be inclusive. So that's something that we'll take on with our debt load, being inclusive with the community, and ideally we do the walking at Woodlands as one example to be accessible for folks who may want to have some access to athletic. Having another auditorium would be amazing. We have that available for folks. So I think, I think we're kind of thinking to your point, like a really big picture and being mindful of how do we serve the entire community, not just our students, with a big project that we're going to take on.
And I kind of agree. Like, I think it'd be better if they brought like specific projects, to collaborate on or something than just like a certain amount every year. Like, for instance, the tennis courts, like if we had contributed X amount because we have teams that play there or something like that. But
and we did contribute to the
yeah,
tennis,
I don't know the number, but
because there was money carryover that was, from Parks and Rec, that was some of our funds. I feel like Township did take a refund or something, and then they ended up putting in more money for that specific project. But there were some of our funds that were used for the courts.
So things like that, I think is probably, we might end up spending more money than just giving them X amount a year because it's something that makes sense for the community. But that's kind of how I look at it too.
The next one on the list is expanding free lunch for all students, regardless of eligibility. Chad and I have been talking with our food service consultant, and it's not as easy as just doing it. So there are more restrictions, and if we become a free for all district, we can't require them to fill out the forms. Well, we sort of need them to, so we can fill back. So if that's really something we want to look at, Chad and I would have to work more to learn more about it, just so we're not violating the federal lunch program, and now we don't get the reimbursement that we expect. So.
Do we have an idea of what it would cost, or not quite yet? Because not sure if it would be able to be administered in a way that would allow us to still collect the federal.
Right. So not taking that into consideration, roughly, I think it was about 280,000 we bring in. Now, I think this is just me speculating here. I think costs could potentially go up because everyone's eating for free, then everyone's eating, which means we're making more. So the revenue side of it is around 280,000. The costs could go up, but then again, so could the reimbursements. That's kind of where we don't know. But revenue-wise, it's around 280.
And on here, suspension of school fees. So again, we already have that protection in for students who are eligible for federal lunch. School fees.
School fees over the past 3 years have averaged around $82,000. There are late. We are owed some on that, but I mean, on average, it's about $82,000 a year.
And these are those general school fees
fees.
When you first get your kid to whatever grade, and you're like, wait a minute, I thought school was free, and then it's not free, and then you get the notices of you haven't paid your fees yet.
Yeah. So by law, those fees have to be for consumables, and I've seen some districts stretch that definition of consumable, where the school issued device that the kid carries with them, they get charged a fee because it's a consumable, technically, and then the apps that get added on. So, like, we buy apps that these teachers use or that connect teachers and students in safe ways. Like, schools are adding those fees on. I would say, generally speaking, we already undercharge fees on things that we could be. So, I'm saying we could be charging more, but we recognize the hardship that it could cause for families. So, we already lower that. If we turn that off totally, do it for a year or two, but then you turn it back on. I don't see that being a value, right? Because now parents will be like, knee jerk here, knee jerk there, right?
Yeah.
So, all right, and then the last on the list that I thought of based on the white paper is allocation of funds towards capital outlay, capital improvements. So There is a line on the forecast, and it's been pretty small, like 10,000 a year. We could say let's beat that up so that as we get ready for this master facility project, we have some additional funds set aside so that either we can get the project done that we want, or with the funding that's coming from other sources, now we have some funds to do an enrichment of the project. So really that question is if we want to do that, and then how much. So
Is there anything negative to doing that? That sounds like a smart idea.
Yeah, the only thing I can really think is if you remember, based on potential bond issue, we did the cash reserve policy. So I wouldn't have necessarily a dollar amount. It would be more monitoring. As long as we're in line with that policy, we could look at the numbers. That would be my only thought to it. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot to do with facilities, whether there's a bond issue or not. So it's not necessarily a bad thing.
And it just seems like it's kind of a good faith measure for the district to be saving money in a capital outlay for a new building project. It just seems responsible to me. I mean,
yes, and I would say that those set asides wouldn't be enough to do the whole project.
correct. Right.
But if it reduces the amount that we need to ask, I think trying to minimize that in light of the recent increases, acknowledging there's still a lot of pending legislation that could reduce the amount that we're collecting. So it's right, like some of these things are low hanging fruit, like the pay to play at 38,000. We can cover that. But starting to talk hundreds of thousands of dollars, then that's different. If the law changes and we're not collecting that.
Exactly. I think that's a great point. We can see how this all shakes out. Hopefully we're able to retain most of what we gained, but law changes could throw a wrench in that whole plan. So
in the capital outlay fund, are those funds put into an interest-bearing account?
yeah,
or-
it's all in Star Ohio.
Okay, so it's all
Yeah.
Star Ohio.
Yep. Most
Okay.
of our funds are in Star
Right.
Ohio.
There, I mean, we haven't met as finance committee for a while. Do we want to go through any of these? I guess just what I'm thinking, some of this, like, there might be a balance that we want to find with, like, maybe we don't collect our small emergency fund for all taxpayers, not just people using the schools. So, you know, all these fees are people using the schools immediately now. They have kids in the schools, which is great to take those fees down. But maybe there's some balance that all the homeowners and property owners could, you know, maybe we look through as a finance committee on which ones and make a recommendation or something. I don't know if that's.
Yeah, and we're going to set up the
If-
next finance committee. I wanted to see how this shook out so we knew
Yeah.
what direction we were going to go with it. But yeah, we'll set that up. I think it's a great idea.
And I don't even know how much that would be, but it's just like maybe in that context of like, is there something for both or just the one or the other? I don't know. But,
Worth exploring for
yeah.
sure.
All right,
All you had?
that's I mean, unless there's other ideas.
No.
Yeah, that was it.
Is there any new business this evening? And we are not.
I don't have a detail.
I think the board will enter into executive session, just the four of us that are here, to talk about personnel and contracts. And there's not going to be any action. Our next regular meeting then would be April 28th at 6 p.m. And need a motion for executive session?
I'll just say the 6 p.m. I believe there's another softball game,
Oh,
so we'll bump it again, but we'll announce that closer.
okay.
so move.
Second.
Mr. Rager,
Yes.
Mrs. Hartley,
Yes.
Dr. LaFay, Mrs. Mast.
Yes. Okay. Mike, I can just let you know when we
Sure.
exit
Yeah.
executive session and then adjourn the meeting.
Sounds great.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks everyone for
Thank you.
coming.
And then I'll get these.
Yeah. Anytime.
Okay. I think
You guys want to go? Well, I don't know if James is staying or for anything, but you guys can go in there.
yeah, it's gonna take like 2 minutes. Yeah, it's not long. Yeah.